President Donald Trump announced that he will enact tariff diplomacy on Mexico, Canada, and China if better terms for America are not met. So, what happens now? I'm Veronica Dudo. Let's find out.
This is In America Today from the Ticker News Studios in New York City.
Mexico has agreed to deploy 10,000 troops to the U.S. Mexico border in exchange for a 1-month delay on President Donald Trump's threatened tariffs. President Trump is also set to talk to Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau as tariffs to that country still loom. For more, we are joined by Pete Sepp, the president of the National Taxpayers Union. Welcome to the show.
My pleasure.
So first, let's begin with what are the main drivers behind the Trump administration's decision to propose these tariffs?
Well, of course, there are several drivers, the obvious one being that the president wants to make America more competitive, have a stronger position economically throughout the world, in-source certain manufacturing and other sectors that have long been a source of imports in the past. But there are other unrelated policy goals to the economy that the president appears to be pursuing. One is controlling flows of people and goods that are illicit across borders in Mexico and Canada. So that's a side goal, and it appears to be the overriding goal, at least with Mexico right now. That's why there was the agreement announced earlier today to bring Mexican troops to the border to try and clamp down on the cartels and the drug smuggling. It's a problem with Canada as well, but economically, this is a high-risk, high-stake game that the United States has chosen to engage in. And the losers could be American consumers if it does actually come down to tariffs being enacted instead of threatened.
Have we ever seen a president move to use tariffs in this way?
Well, President Biden used tariff threats as diplomatic or economic pressure tools, but probably not to the degree that President Trump has, certainly not so early in a presidential term as Donald Trump has, and certainly not so forcefully in terms of the percentage of tariff and the broad applicability of the tariff on many, many goods that would come across the United States. And so I think this is a matter of degree, and Donald Trump is pursuing it at a new level.
Have we ever seen something like this? As you mentioned, these tariffs are mainly to target illicit flow, both from the North and the South. Again, is this unprecedented?
There isn't much of a precedent when it comes to the flow of illicit goods in terms of these tariffs being levied. Now, there have been tariffs that have been equally harsh in past history, the Smoot-Hawley tariffs, which are often for precipitating or at least prolonging the economic downturn worldwide. Now, when it comes to actually trying to stop drugs from coming over a border, certainly not. We haven't seen something like this.
How might these tariffs affect America's global standing, particularly in terms of leadership among allies?
Well, there are several things to consider here when it comes to the threat of tariffs versus the actual execution of tariffs. The threat of tariffs can certainly bring other trading partners to the negotiating table to hammer out practical changes to trade agreements. They can be used as a threat to stem the flow of drugs coming across the border, the fentanyl crisis being the motivator for this round of tariffs. Unfortunately, economically, the tariffs might actually backfire because the U.S. dollar has been getting stronger under the threat of these tariffs. That can make the flow and the illegal trafficking of fentanyl more attractive to the criminals who are doing it. That could backfire. Now, with the execution of tariffs, we've already seen the problems that come with it. For example, Joe Biden's tariffs against China ended up costing the typical American family $1,700, and it invited retaliatory actions. Before the announcement from Mexico came, we had calculated that the typical household would have to pay an extra 800 some dollars every year because of the broad-based tariffs that were going against Mexico, China, and Canada. That number is probably smaller now that the Mexican tariffs have been paused. But then again, this is a very unpredictable situation, and you have all kinds of potential economic impacts. Canada, for example, is a major source for potash, and we saw Senator Grassley from Iowa begging the administration to exempt potash from these Canadian tariffs because that's where our farmers get that critical raw material to carry out their own agricultural operations. You can find parallels in other areas like hardwood and softwood lumber tariffs or steel tariffs. Those are the kinds of things that make raw materials more expensive, and you could idle construction workers, you could idle auto workers, many others who depend on affordable access to those materials in the United States.
So a lot of people are trying to understand the complexities of all of this. Can you explain the concept of the uncertainty tax and how it impacts both businesses and consumers?
Yeah, the uncertainty tax is this turmoil that gets created with threats of tariffs, executions of tariffs, retaliatory actions from other countries, basically upending the norms of the trade system. Now, the president has said the norms of the trade system are something he would like to change. Oh, fair enough. But with that kind of uncertainty in policy comes financial uncertainty. Investors here in the United States, not just abroad, have to wonder, well, should I put my money into an automobile manufacturing plant when suddenly the costs of inputs that my workers will need here in the United States will go way up? Investors may say, not worth it. We're going to sit that out right now. And what happens with retaliation from other countries? Canada imports a number of products from the United States, hundreds of them. They could very well slap tariffs on our products that we're trying to export. That will affect the balance of trade. That will end up raising calls, possibly among our own farmers, for help when they can't get their goods into Canada, and taxpayers face another bailout situation, direct subsidies to our farmers to compensate them. That could get very costly.
Pete, Sepp, thanks so much for your time, and it's something everyone seems to be watching.
Thanks for having me.
This is Ticker. We'll be right back.